this morning. It is a real pleasure. I'm really excited to introduce today's talk. You might have heard the news that all 80 watersheds in Minnesota now have watershed restoration and protection strategies, or RAPS. It, no doubt goes without saying that this has involved just an enormous amount of work over the years, including problem investigation, monitoring, stressor identification, modeling, TMDLs, GIS work, project management, obviously, report writing, and addressing several legal challenges along the way. And here today to tell us about this remarkable achievement are Heather Johnson and Theresa Haugen, both of the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, who will also talk about the other work that the Watershed program does to support other programs, including the revision of the Nutrient Reduction Strategy, Clean Water Act Section 319 Small Watershed Program, Healthier Watersheds website, St. Louis River Mercury TMDL, and We Are Water, amongst others. And so just a little bit more about our speakers before we get going. Heather Johnson is the South Watershed Section Manager, and prior to the MPCA, she spent over 15 years at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture. And I had the pleasure of working with Heather in that capacity for several years there, with positions as senior hydrologist and supervisor, among others, focusing on pesticides in both groundwater and surface water. Before that, she spent time in local, state, and federal offices working on watershed plans, stream water quality monitoring, and flood forecasting. Heather has a BA in environmental studies and a Master of Science in water resource science. Theresa Haugen, also with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, is our North Section Manager in the Watershed Division. Theresa has served in a variety of positions and leadership roles over the last 15 years at the MPCA, including industrial and municipal wastewater permitting and subsurface sewage treatment system compliance and enforcement. Theresa holds a Bachelor of Arts in Biology from the College of St. Benedict and a Master's in Public Administration and Environmental Studies from St. Cloud State University. And with that, Heather and Theresa, the floor is yours. Take it away.
All right. Well, thank you for that very nice introduction, Mark. I'm going to go ahead and get us started here with the presentation, and then Heather and I will trade off throughout the talk. And can everybody see my screen? I think it's
looks good.
Okay, thank you, Heather. Okay, so here's just a brief overview of what we're going to be covering today. There's a lot of work going on, a lot of things to cover, so we're just touching very, very briefly on all these different items, but I'm going to quickly talk about who we are, and then we're going to talk about the watershed framework. We'll talk a little bit about TMDLs and RAPs, what they are. We're going to talk about the progress that we've made with those documents. We're going to talk about some of the other areas of work that we do within the watershed program. We'll quickly touch on a success story, and then also talk briefly about improving in where we want to go and what we hope to accomplish here in the watershed program. So here is a slide just very briefly showing who we are and where we are. We currently have 64 people in the watershed program. That includes leadership. We have staff based out of all of our 6 regional offices and in the central office in St. Paul as well. We have a total of 7 supervisors and 2 managers, Heather and myself. I'm overseeing the North Section and international work with Canada, and then Heather has the South Section, so basically the southern basins there, and Heather oversees the specific statewide work that we have within the program. We have a number of staff that work in a variety of different areas, as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide here. We have folks that do flow and problem investigation monitoring. These folks go out and collect flow data at 80 different locations around the state and then spend time on specific water quality issues as well. We have stressor identification staff. So this is a group of folks that take a look at different reaches of water within a watershed and figure out the problem with the water when it's not meeting water quality standards, or try to figure out what that problem is, what's making that water sick, if you will. We also have modelers. We now have 5 modelers in-house. We have ramped up that group in recent years. We used to contract a lot of that work out, but now we have it in-house. But these folks work on refining, calibrating, digging into the water quality data, and putting together models that feed into our TMDLs and RAPs. We also now have TMDL writers, and this is new too. We used to consult all this work out in years past, but in recent years we have hired this expertise in-house, and we now have 3 TMDL writers, and they produce most of our TMDLs for the state. We have our project managers. So we have project managers in all of the offices, and they cover all 80 watersheds. They each have specific watersheds that they're assigned to, and they really oversee all the different components and all this work that goes on within the watershed program. They tie it all together and oversee the RAPS development, which I'll talk about on an upcoming slide. And they're also really the local connection to the local partners, so sort of the face of the watershed program. But they have a lot of really great relationships developed with local partners, with tribal nations, with any external party that we might interface with in the work that we do. And those connections and that relationship that project managers have is very, very valuable. We also have GIS staff who focus on GIS projects, data analysis, map making, and we're currently hiring a 3rd. We have folks that do our data analysis, data management, and work at high level program coordination, not only within the program, but with other agencies as well. We have Clean Water Act Section 319 staff. Heather will talk about that more later. And we also have a Lake Area Management Plan coordinator. This person works under the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement, so working with other state, federal, and international partners on Great Lakes Restoration Initiative work for Lake Superior. And then last but not least, we have our nutrient reduction strategy team. This is something that Heather will touch on later too, so I won't say a whole lot about that, but a lot of great work going on there as well. Okay, so next here, just to touch on the funding component a little bit here in the watershed program. As you can see, back in fiscal year 10, 11, so 12-ish or so years ago, we had started out at about $18 million. So this is what we were taking in and spending through our program here at the agency. You can see it ramped up to about 20.2 in FY 16-17, and now we're down to about 12.7. So we're spending a lot less here at the agency than what we used to. The money is still being spent on water quality. It's just going into different efforts. So more of the money now is going towards implementation rather than science. So the money, going to local partners for on the ground projects to improve the water quality, because now they have the science and they know what needs to be done. So we've ramped down quite a bit over the years, and there's other reasons for that too. And we've gotten more efficient as we've learned more and developed better strategies. We don't spend quite as much on civic engagement as we used to. We've got better strategy figured out there, and we have the initial RAPs developed for all of our 80 watersheds, which is a big deal and a really big accomplishment. Now we're going in and updating those documents, and it doesn't cost as much. It's less expensive. And then, as mentioned on the last slide, we're doing more work in-house, the modeling, the TMDL writing, all that we used to contract out. Now we do it in-house, and that's just less expensive as well. All right, let's see here. Next slide. Just a little few fun geology facts here related to Minnesota. You can see here the continental divide. So, of course, a long time ago when we had the sheets of ice, the glaciers coming in, they moved and shifted across the land, pushed, scraped the earth, leaving behind ridges and plains. Glaciers melted, and we got our lakes formed in the low areas, forming our 22,000-ish lakes. Rivers flowed around the ridges and then drained into the three great river systems that move all of our Minnesota-borne water to three distant seas, which is kind of neat when you stop and think about it. And then those glacial ridges form our continental divide. So it's Minnesota has a rare three-way continental divide, which is neat. But from there, we take those three major river basins, divide them into the 10 basins within the state, and then further divide them into the 80 Huck 8 watersheds. And that's the level that we most commonly work at within the program. And then those 80 Huck 8 watersheds, of course, drain into the three major river basins that you can see on this slide. All right, so now shifting into the watershed framework. So this is the watershed approach that the state of Minnesota developed to focus holistically on each watershed's condition as a scientific basis of monitoring, planning, implementation, and then the measurement of results. So this process looks strategically at a drainage area or a basin or watershed as a whole, instead of just focusing on one lake or stream at a time and piecing it together. It's more effective and efficient to look at it as a whole. And this framework connects state programs across many different state agencies, local partners, and encourages public participation. And it uses the best available science to support decisions. And as you can see here, the different stages, the monitoring, assessment of the water, the characterization, that problem investigation work, and the applied research that's necessary there, the restoration and protection strategy development, so the RAPS, talk more about that in the upcoming slide, and then the waterhead or the comprehensive watershed management plan, so the local implementation or the documentation that feeds into local implementation, and it cycles around those different phases. Okay, so just to touch a little bit more on what is a RAPS, why do we do them? So again, a RAPS is a watershed restoration and protection strategy document. It includes a lot of different work, not just like work done within the watershed program, but with other programs. EAO does a lot of work, a lot of monitoring work that feeds into the RAPS document, the intensive water monitoring. The SID, so the problem investigation, it looks at any TMDLs that have been done, other state agency work, local input, takes all of these different components plus additional research that we might do within our program and ties them all into a document that lays out, what do we need to do to address both restoration of water, so water not meeting water quality standards, what do we need to do to get it to standards? And then for the water that is in good condition, what do we need to do to make sure it continues to stay protected? We don't want water condition to get worse, of course. So that's what this document does. It's the science, and it informs the local water planning efforts. So Bowser and their Watershed One plan will take the RAPS document and take a look at it, and it will help them and local partners, counties, SWCDs, it'll help them prioritize what needs to be done and to really target the implementation fund. So target the project work that needs to be done, because we can't do everything at once, right? So it's a helpful document, a lot of great information. And again, we have one completed now for all of our different watersheds across the state. And we've now gone in and begun to look at them and just update them as necessary. Okay, so the monitoring schedule, just touch on this very quickly. So we began monitoring all the different watersheds, and EAO is a huge component of this, but began monitoring all the watersheds in about 2008. Went through and completed the first round, so approximately 8 watersheds a year. 10 years it takes typically to get through the entire state. Completed the first round in 2018. And so we're now into the second round of monitoring, actually about halfway into the second round of monitoring all the watersheds across the state. So going back in and collecting additional water quality data to compare to see what the conditions are and if progress has been made. Not all sites are being monitored the second time as we did in the first cycle. There's more of a focus with the second round of monitoring on the data needs of local partners, and that's referred to as the surface water monitoring requests program or process. It used to be referred to as the state and local needs. So same thing, and that is led by the EAO division in close coordination with our watershed program staff, just regarding the site selection, parameters, and then related decision making to that monitoring plan. Okay, so here we have a slide. The point of this slide really is just to touch on our total maximum daily loads, our TMDL documents. Every water body for the most part is assessed, and again, I've mentioned before, we investigate problems, stressors with that water. From there, we create a list of impaired waters, those that fail to meet water quality standards. That's done every 2 years. And so for those waters that do not meet water quality standards, for most of them, we are required to develop this TMDL document, which at the most basic level, it's the amount. A TMDL is a document that describes the maximum amount of a pollutant that a water body can handle or receive without violating the water quality standard. So the TMDL process takes a look at all the different sources of that pollutant and determines how much each source needs to reduce what it's contributing so that the water quality standard can be met. A TMDL might set limits on pollutants entering water bodies, and it can also serve as just a planning tool for improving water quality. TMDLs are also great at identifying areas of high pollutant loads and then indicating those locations where reducing a pollutant would be of particular benefit. Okay, let's see here, next slide. This is where I am going to pass it off to Heather, and she's going to cover the next 16-ish or so slides, and then I'll come back on.
Thank you, Theresa. Yeah, that's a great overview talking about what we're doing with our programs, and I'll just hop back in here to talk about, so Theresa was just talking about the work that's been done with the IWM and the stressor IDs and getting impaired when water gets listed. And so this slide is just talking about the comparisons. If you're saying, well, why do you do TMDLs and what is a RAPS? Well, this slide gives a good comparison. Is the TMDLs, they are required by the Federal Clean Water Act for all impaired waters. Whereas RAPS, they are for all waters of the state, and that was required by the State Clean Water Legacy Amendment, which I'll talk about that a little bit further in. TMDLs, they, as Theresa indicated, they set those pollutant load reductions for impaired waters, while again, RAPS, we actually incorporate the TMDL findings for those impaired waters, and then strategies for waters that are not addressed by TMDLs. And finally, TMDLs call for pollutant reductions from unregulated sources, while RAPS use strategies to protect waters that are in good condition. Next slide. So this chart here shows the progress that we have made with TMDLs and the amount that we've been able to produce over the years. So prior to the Clean Water Fund Legacy Amendment of 2008, PCA actually had very little money to do TMDL work, and we'd actually only completed 147 TMDLs prior to 2008. But post that time, we have really kicked it in with the combination of money that initially was spent with a lot of consultants. But now, as we indicated earlier, we have 3 really good TMDL writers and staff. And so since, and they came on just in the last few years, which has really allowed us kind of that expertise again in-house. But since 2008, we've completed over 1,600 TMDLs. So again, just another good benefit of the Clean Water Fund. Next slide. So we've talked about how TMDLs get put together. Now, the actual RAPS reports, as we said, the project managers, they are really the hub. They are the ones out in the watersheds, and they are the ones who help to pull this all together. So they pull together the IWM work. They pull together the stressor ID work. They're looking at those documents, and then they're talking with the GIS staff and having them help us make maps. And then they're interacting with the modelers who are running calculations and looking at computer modeling for targeting strategies. And then they're helping, or they've either in the past, some of these reports have been written by consultants, but now again, we're having project managers doing the writing themselves. So we also, within that RAPS, will incorporate the draft TMDL. Well, we'll incorporate all the information that's pertinent from the TMDL report as well. So that gets incorporated. But as you can see with this picture, core to the work is the process is that partner and public participation. So this is a picture from the Blue Earth River watershed and some of the work that was done there. And so in that watershed, the project manager had a really heavy emphasis on civic engagement and connecting with people who live in the watershed. And they wanted to discuss what implementation and protection strategies would work best for them. And, you know, big picture, we just can't do this work without our public partners. So next slide. But as we talk about, like, okay, we've completed all 80, but I thought it was kind of interesting just to go back in time because, you know, I've only been with PCA for a little over a year. So I was trying to think about and find out, like, well, how did we get to the 80? So you can see here, this is one of the first tracking maps we had for looking at RAPS progress. So the completed RAPS here are shown in the dark blue. So it was Minnesota statute 11.4D.26 that meant that a portion of the Clean Water Legacy Act said that PCA needed to complete 10% of RAPS each year. Well, it sounds like we quickly found out that wasn't possible because we were first waiting on monitoring assessment from the first watersheds to be completed. We were just trying to figure out, like, what does this all mean? What does it mean to put together RAPS? What do these products look like? And so when IWM really started in earnest in 2008, 2009, we got assessments then in 2010. So that means if we were really ready to go, we probably would have been producing about 8 a year in 2014, but at that point, that wasn't the pace. So as of 2016, we'd had 8 of 80, and the Pomme de Terre was the very first one completed in March of 2013. So next slide. Jumping forward to 2020, you can see we had definitely made progress with 46 watersheds with RAPS completed. So how? Well, it sounds like we added more people. We figured out exactly what our products were, and we got a lot better and more efficient in pulling together. We really started to use the models that had been used in-house. There was a MASQUID resolution that called on us to set a schedule and stick to it. So I think that was a good motivator as well. And we just really had great partners that were engaged and were interested in these products and could see the value. And also one helpful thing was in the previous year of May, the statute was amended to say that all RAPS had to be completed by June 30th, 2023. And then updated subsequently as needed. So now we definitely had that final deadline. So next slide. So you can see we're getting closer here. September 21, 70 watersheds have RAPS approved, but remember, COVID had slowed things down. So we were definitely feeling this deadline. Next slide. But no surprise, as we talked about, in June of 23, we completed the last of our rafts, which was the Blue Earth River, and we met our statutory deadline. We definitely enjoyed looking at this map for a few months and enjoying the fact that we had completed all the work. You know, couldn't have done it without everybody's hard work putting forth this, but you know, our work isn't done, and this work just continues on to the next part of that watershed framework. So next slide. So you heard Theresa talk about the one watershed, one plan. And so, you know, RAPS informs this. So this helps to provide valuable information about what and where to prioritize for that process. So much of that work is done through Bowser's One Watershed, One Plan, which leads then to implementation and funding of those strategies. So they call theirs a comprehensive watershed management plan, which aligns local water planning purposes and procedures on watershed boundaries to create this systematic, watershed-wide, science-based approach to watershed management. Next slide. So in the last few years, we have done surveys of our local partners to ask, like, how are these products going? How is the work that we're doing, what Bowser's doing, are things lining up? And here's responses from one question. So here, you know, again, and this was to local governments, because in the end, they are our primary audience for the survey because they are the boots on the ground. They lead the development and the implementation of those plans. So you can see with here, over the 4 survey years, 95, I should say, we're really satisfied with these results. And in 2022, we see that 95% of local partners agreed that One Watershed, One Plans were consistent with the RAPs. So this is all great. You know, there's much more information on surveys. If you're interested, we could show you. But this is just to indicate that, you know, we are checking in, trying to make certain that the products are being used, and we feel very good with the results from these surveys. So next slide. So now, you know, Theresa has touched a little bit upon this, the fact that, you know, now we're into that next cycle, what we're calling cycle 2. So I won't go into anything on this slide since I think we've already touched on it. So next slide. But I'll talk about, you know, we've been calling them RAPs. Well, so now that the 80 RAPs are completed, what is next? Well, our next phase is what we're calling a RAPs update. So the purpose of those updates are to compare, contrast, and summarize changes in water quality conditions and progress towards those water quality goals from the initial cycle 1 monitoring from that IWM and the RAPs that was put together. We also want to provide additional water quality data and other information to support any ongoing local water planning and implementation. And finally, RAPS updates, we're really looking to update those strategies necessary to restore and protect surface water quality in the watershed. Next slide. So we love our maps, so we are continuing to track this next effort as well. So you can see here is our RAPS report update status. You can track our progress too. So this is on our Healthier Watersheds website, which I'll be talking about a little bit more later, but you can just Google that and you'll be able to see this for yourself. As you can see, the status right now is we have completed 2 RAPS updates fully. We have 1 right now in public notice. We have 7 being drafted in different parts of completion. And then we have over 30 watersheds being worked on. So again, the work does not stop. Our project managers are actively engaged in many of these locations, and we're excited for this next phase for RAPS updates. Next slide. So now I'm going to touch on, again, just some of the statewide work that we do. So kind of moving away from the RAPs and just focusing now on the last part of this presentation on different work that's happening statewide. And then Theresa will finish talking about work that's happening up in the north, and then a success story that we're really proud of. So one of the large projects that our program supports is the Minnesota Nutrient Reduction Strategy work, or we often call it, you've heard it, NRS. So you can see here through these different graphics, NPCA provides state level support for BMP science, tools and resources and progress tracking. So we have our local goals that are established through the RAPs and the One Watershed, One Plan, and then downstream goals that are established through the Gulf Hypoxia Task Force, which is led by the US EPA. And then we have modeling and monitoring work that's being done by the USGS. Then that's happening in the whole Mississippi River Basin. And so you can see this is definitely a wide-reaching project that we are super proud to be part of. Next slide. You can see this work started back in, well, before 2014, but that's the first report that we reduced. But to help update our goals and actions to achieve water quality needs in Minnesota and our neighbors, we are updating the NRS using new models, new data, and new partnerships. So it was first released in 2014, followed by a 5-year progress report in 2020. We have now slated the update to be completed by the end of 2025. So only the 12 states in the Hypoxia Task Force, which are the largest loaders to the river, are eligible for the Gulf of Mexico Hypoxia Program, which is federal fund money. We have 10 major organizations in the state that take part in this update with us. We have a steering committee that's made up of upper management of all those organizations and agencies. We have a technical team, and then we have 6 sub-teams. And this is, you know, the sub-teams is really where a lot of the work is getting done. And PCA is coordinating all of this work. So with those 6 sub-teams, we have groups that are meeting on ag BMP science, ag BMP adoption, wastewater nitrogen, river loads and goals, watershed scale integration and tools, and progress tracking. So these groups, I know by now everybody has started meeting, and I will be super excited in another year or 2 to come back to share just what we have been able to put together. So just be on the lookout for this next part of the NRS. And I got one more slide on it next. So the hope with this update is looking at, you know, some of these are our core goals, is we want greater ownership and implementation of the NRS by other state agencies, LGUs, and tribal nations. We want to do further identification and support adoption of the most effective BMPs for agricultural, stormwater, and wastewater. We're looking to get some accessible tracking of ongoing progress for greater accountability. We're looking to have improved tools and low reduction targets for applying NRS to the watershed scale, not just a basin scale. We're looking for specific strategies for wastewater nitrogen reduction and support for those high need facilities. Big right now is we want climate resilient plans. We want to protect Minnesota waterways and the way of life for the future. And then we're also looking really closely at specific strategies to expand on past progress. As you can see with total phosphorus, things are going really good. We got a lot of significantly decreasing trends across the state in Minnesota, but obviously, as most of you guys all know, cannot say the same thing for nitrate. So we are looking to mirror the phosphorus successes we've had in lowering nitrogen loads. And overall, big picture, safe, clean water for Minnesota and our neighbors. Next slide. So I'll step through the rest of these pretty quickly. I want to make sure we leave enough time. So our group also is in charge of the Clean Water Act Section 319 small watershed projects. They are spread, this map right here shows where those locations are. They're spread around the state. So 35 watersheds have developed this EPA 9 key element water-based plans. And what's unique about this effort is that these plans are developed as if the entire watershed goals will be met in 10 years. And so we know that's probably not likely, but that was the view, trying to say that, well, what if we could? What if we had enough funding to really get to all of the water quality concerns that are within a watershed? So in terms of the funding, each of those watersheds are eligible for 1/10 of the annual EPA Section 319 grant award every 4 years. So basically, a watershed will be funded 4 times over 16 years, and they're going to get approximately $1.1 million. So about $280,000 every 4 years to do straight out implementation work on the landscape. So you can see right there, this project started in earnest in 2020, where we've already seen some of these watersheds completing and starting to spend through that 200,000, and now it's just been following each year. And now in 2023, we have the last, I think, 6 groups that are getting their funding, and we're doing the final work plans and getting contracts executed. So Super excited about this. You know, these plans are focused on a combination of stream and lake plans with some restoration and other protection focuses as well. We do feel, you know, it's pretty early in the program yet, but we feel like there's been some really good successful implementation milestones. And along with this, we are looking to pilot some effectiveness monitoring. We're going to do it right now, just at one location at Skunk Creek, which is one of our 319 small watershed places. One of our 319 small watershed spots. So details on that is all still coming together, but just know we'll, at the end of our presentation, Theresa is going to be sharing a success story of things we've already been seeing in Skunk Creek, which is super exciting. Next slide, and I think my last slide here. So finally, just other work that's being done in the South Watershed is we have the Clean Water Partnership Loan Program. That is something specific for low interest loans to local units of government for implementing non-point source best management practices and other activities that target restoration and protection of water resources. They can be formed for a lot of any non-point BMPs. I think last year we did give a loan for street sweepers. So it's anything that can improve the water quality. So that's a program that we're going to be looking to try and publicize more and get some more traction going about it. We have EMPA, which is the Environmental Performance Partnership Agreement. This helps lead some of our it's a federal grant. It helps lead money that gives to our TMDL Vision 2.0. Again, I talked about the Healthier Watershed. This is a website that we show information on RAPS completion status, TMDL status, wastewater loading by facility and BMPs implemented by Watershed, and also spending on implementation projects. So I encourage you to go take a look and see that information we have there. The link will be at the end of our presentation. We also have a few other ones that are listed here, but I want to make certain we get enough time. So I'm going to turn it over to Theresa now to talk about the North Watershed Program function areas.
All right, thank you, Heather. Okay, so just very quickly here, this slide lists out some of the other program areas that we focus on in the northern half of the state. So of course, up in the north, we share a boundary with Canada, international work, sharing the Rainy River, water draining through the Red River as well, all up to Lake Winnipeg. So because the water doesn't, of course, follow geographical boundaries, we have to work very collaboratively with our Canadian partners and other neighboring states to achieve water quality goals. So to accomplish this work, myself and a number of staff in the northern section work very closely with our international, state, and federal partners through different work groups and different boards. We also have the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative work that is done with our Lake Superior Management Plan coordinator. And a lot of this other coordination, collaborative work is done through two different boards with the Red River and the Rainy Lake of the Woods watershed boards underneath the International Joint Commission. In the Red River Basin, there are a few other boards and groups that we sit on to help with this coordination work, the Red River Basin Commission and the Red River Watershed Management Board, Flood Storage Reduction Work Group. There are also a number of special studies that occur in the north and in the south as well, but really taking unique looks to understand the geophysical relationship of the landscapes, the hydrology, human interaction with each, and doing this on a statewide scale. We have partnerships with our local partners at the SWCD, so we attend their MASWCD meetings, and then we have a few other unique areas too that we've been working on. The We Are Water, I'll just touch on that on the next slide. That's a statewide effort. We help partner on that, and then the Keep It Clean campaign is something that we've been partnering with locals on and other state agencies as well, and I'll touch on that a little bit more on an upcoming slide. So here's just a little bit more information about We Are Water. It's a partnership that we have with Minnesota Humanities Center and local partners, but they basically different entities can apply every year. And there's approximately 5 that are selected to be host communities for the We Are Water exhibit. And it's really a project or an exhibit that aims to bring the technical water information side by side with personal stories and local context, so that it brings what people like to say the heart and the head together, and helps form a deeper relationship with water, and helps those that are doing the work with water form stronger partnerships as well, so that moving forward they can continue to do the great work that they're doing and do even better. So they're at their last exhibit for the year in Stillwater. It runs through December 4th. And then on the slide there, you can see where they'll be going in 2024, moving around the state, including a couple of different tribal nations, which is great. So if you've never been, I encourage you to check it out. It's free, and it's a really neat exhibit. The Keep It Clean, I'll just touch on this. So this is actually a campaign or a group, it's community stakeholders that started at the Lake of the Woods to address the growing problem of garbage and human waste left behind on the ice after the ice fishing season. It's really become a major problem, especially on some of the larger lakes up north, with these new sort of like fancy campers, these wheelhouse fish houses that people, it's almost like there's a community out on the lake with these nice campers, and the garbage left behind has been very problematic. So number of local entities have gotten together to start raising awareness about this issue, and it's really taken off. They've been working on it for about the last 10 years, but it's grown, and they've had more than 50 Minnesota lakes join this effort. And in this last year, they actually, and working closely with DNR is also a big partner in this effort, they were able to sign a bill into law that makes it illegal for garbage and waste to be placed on or under the ice in Minnesota lakes and rivers. So if a DNR conservation officer sees a bag of garbage on the ice, they can ticket a person. I think it's $25 fine. But prior to that, they couldn't do that. It was illegal to leave your garbage behind, but in order to do anything about it, a DNR conservation officer had to actually see somebody like driving away and leaving garbage behind, which is difficult to do. So passed some legislation, which is great. And now they're really just working on promoting and educating folks not to leave their garbage behind. And they've seen a lot of success. And on the right there, you can see a picture of an educational wheelhouse that they just had built this past summer. It was on display at the state fair, and they got a lot of exposure. They plan to be there next year. They're right by the DNR building, the DNR fishing pond, if you're familiar with this, with the state fair. And they've also gotten Ron Shera on board with this effort. And if you go to the Keep It Clean website, you can see there's a little YouTube video that he put together, and it's pretty funny, but it has a good message about not leaving your garbage or waste behind. Okay, so let's see here. The St. Louis River Mercury TMDL. I thought I'd just touch on this very quickly. This is a joint effort between EAO and Watershed. It's the first mercury, water specific mercury TMDL that we're doing as an agency. We of course have the statewide mercury TMDL that was developed back in 2007. A lot of great work has been done there since. But there are a number of water bodies in the state where the mercury is so high that the statewide TMDL doesn't do what needs to be done to address those needs. And so a specific TMDL for mercury needs to be done for those water bodies. So we're starting with the St. Louis River Mercury TMDL. And the goal is to, of course, in the end, support healthy consumption of fish. And so to meet the mercury levels in fish so that we can eat the fish safely out of there, and then make sure the water level mercury isn't too high either. This is a really big project. It's contentious. We tried to start this TMDL, oh, it was 10 years ago, a number of years ago, and the science just wasn't quite where it wanted to be in short, and so it stalled out. And because of that, it's something that a lot of people really care externally, internally as well about, and want to see it move forward this time. So the team of staff are working really hard to engage external partners and to gather their input and to make sure that this Mercury TMDL is done as well as we can right now. I could say a whole lot more about this, but we're short on time, so I'm just going to move on. But it's underway, and the goal is to have it drafted on public notice by the end of 2025, maybe early 26. So kind of switching gears here again, in the watershed program, where do we hope to go and what do we want to accomplish? So Heather talked about the RAPS updates. I won't say a whole lot more about that. We're working on that right now. We're looking at the water quality, identifying trends there, along with biology trends, identifying successes. Where do we have delistings? Where do we have water quality improvements? Again, catching up on the TELU and lakes from the first 5 years of the first cycle one, and just making sure we're providing the information that local partners need, and incorporating other pieces of information such as EJ climate change as we move forward. Looking at nitrate reduction, Heather touched on that with the nitrogen reduction strategy. That's something that continues to be important, and something that we continue to think about in the watershed program as well. Water quality trading, it's a great tool. And then just thinking about the Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment, expires in 2034. So we've got time left, and we've done a lot of great work, but that's just always on the horizon there. And then lastly, I will just end here on a success story up in the north. I won't do this justice here with what I have to say, but what I can say is it's a really great project. A lot of really great work went into it. Proud of the outcomes, and it's just a good example of what we can accomplish when we go out there and do our work. So this is Skunk Creek is a cold water stream in northern Minnesota, flows into the Maggie River, which is a main tributary to Lake Superior. And it was estimated to deliver over 154,000 tons of sediment a year to the Duluth Superior Harbor. So a ton of sediment. It is estimated that it costs over $2 million a year to dredge that sediment back out. And so work was done here in the Skunk Creek to, of course, address that problem that resulted from logging and from putting culverts in, and just different human activities that really altered the runoff and the stream flows. So going in and fixing those problems has led to success, which is great. Able to go through and stabilize the banks, regrade them so that the stream could access the floodplain, of course, slow that sediment down. Other BMPs, rock, log structures were placed for stability, created good fish habitat. And then they also did culvert and road maintenance to help with stream channel restoration, stabilizing those ravines, those banks. And by removing the culverts, they were able to enhance the fish habitat with trout and whatnot. So it's a really great success story. I'm for sure not doing it justice, but again, very proud of it and the work that's been done here. And there's just a few more pictures. So the culvert, that was the barrier again. It's been removed, so we have brook trout and brown trout that have been able to move into the upstream reaches, increasing the fish numbers by 3 times as sampled by the PCA bio crews. So it's a great measure of effectiveness and success. And that is all that we have today. Thank you everyone for listening in. Here are a few of the resources or websites that Heather touched on today. And oops, I have to click over here. Sorry about that. There's a picture of the trout and Skunk Creek. And okay, now we're at the end. And here's our reference slide. So thanks again, everyone, for listening in. I think we've got a few minutes here for questions if folks have any.
Yes, well, thank you. Thank you to both of you for sharing this great, all these great accomplishments with us. It's been very interesting for me, having started in the watershed program in 2007 before RAPS was even a thing. It's pretty exciting to see the progress that's been made and all of the successes that's happening over the years. So thank you for sharing that with all of us today. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to put those in the chat, or of course, you're always welcome to just unmute yourself and ask your question directly to our presenters. So I'm not seeing anything in the chat right now at the moment. But we did have a really great turnout. So we are starting to see folks leave probably for that 9 o'clock or that 10 o'clock, I'm sorry, a meeting or appointment on their calendar.
Well, I have one question to get us going anyway. I was looking at the map of the watersheds in Minnesota, and I was curious, what do you do with the watersheds that are shared or even predominantly in Iowa or other states? Do they also have wraps, or how do you deal with that?
Yes, I mean, I can touch on that very quickly for the North. So like in working even with Canada, like a different country, we have these boards and these work groups where we come together and we talk about common goals. Everybody has common goals, but in different countries, even we work under different regulations. And of course, no one has authority over one or another, but through conversation and partnerships and relationships, we're able to arrive at common goals and work toward common goals. So for example, in the Red River Basin, we have water quality nutrient objectives, which are goals for phosphorus and for nitrate. And those goals, especially with the phosphorus, they line up with our TMDLs. And that's what we've agreed to meet our reductions at. And Canada and North Dakota are working towards their own, but it's really in the North coming together, having conversations, and then really trying to reach those common goals. And I think probably the same could be said about the South and neighboring states.
Yeah, we do make a wrap. So like the Blue Earth, part of that watershed does go to Iowa. So we do make our product for the part that's in Minnesota. But I do think since so much of the water, all of the water in the South is draining through the Mississippi River Basin, you can look to the work that we do with the nutrient reduction strategy as kind of that's how we're interacting with the states south of us. But in terms of like a specific Huck 8, it does really just focus on what can we do in Minnesota. But I'm sure there are some conversations that go across state, but not probably to the level of what Theresa is doing with obviously the connections with Canada.
Yeah, and I'll just add too with the nutrient reduction strategy with the update, something that's a little different than the last round is, I mean, the nutrient reduction strategy is a statewide document. Of course, it focuses on the Mississippi River Basin because of the Gulf of Mexico and the monies that come in. But with the update, we are putting a little bit more of an emphasis on the northern part of the state. So the Rainy Basin, the Red River Basin, and Lake Superior. and trying to emphasize that a little bit more, because the goals that are in the nutrient reduction strategy also line up with those boundary water goals that we have in the north. So it is a statewide document, even though it's often thought of as just something for the south.
Looks like we do have one question in the chat. I'm not sure if either of you would be able to answer this, but we'll give it a shot. How do you address a biological impairment versus an impairment impacted by development?
That's a good question. I mean, this would be something at this, like our stressor ID. So if they're out and they're, they've gotten the water quality information and now they're going out into the watershed, that would be part of their work as they're looking to figure out why is this water impaired. If they note it's something that's by people or some type of development, I think, that's just all part of our RAPS process of looking at, well, what are strategies that could be done to help improve that? So there would be strategies identified that could be placed for implementation. But Theresa, you have any other further thoughts on that?
Yeah, and if it's something, if you're seeing an issue in the water related to development, and that development is related to a point source discharge, say like a municipal wastewater treatment plant or an industrial facility that's discharging into that water body and has that particular pollutant in their effluent, then we can take a look at that and come up with a limit essentially that needs to be plugged into their permit to address that portion that they're contributing to that impairment. So that's another strategy that we take to address any kind of impacts we see that might be related to development.
Great. Well, thank you for answering the questions, and thank you again for being here today and sharing your work with everybody. We really appreciate the time that you put into preparing for today and getting everything ready. So thanks again for being here and presenting to our group today. So it is 10 o'clock. So with that, I think we will let folks go. And I'm assuming if there's any other follow-up questions that you guys are always happy to chat with anyone after if they contact you with more questions. So
For sure.
Thank you so much.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening.
perfect.
Have a
Thanks
great day.
everyone for being here today.